But first we're going to call that method. So recipe.new, and we're going to call the method recipe params. And here we'll say private. Now when you use private inside the class, the method, any method here would only be available in this class. You want to separate it out from these other methods, okay? And a good way to do that is indent it one more indentation tab, basically. So that way you can easily differentiate between private methods and non-private ones, okay? So recipe params. And so params dot require, the top level object that we want to do this on is recipe. So colon recipe, and dot permit, because we want to permit certain parameters. What do we want to permit? We want to permit name, so colon name. We want to permit summary, so colon summary, and then we want to permit colon description. Okay. So now this add recipe object will be able to mass assign and create a new recipe based on the recipe params method, and that will permit the name, summary, and description, which are whitelisted, to flow through. Okay, so that should work now. Now, one thing I want to talk about here is, for the integrity of our data, we will need a chef object or a chef ID associated with each recipe. Since we have a one-to-many association, we don't want to get into a situation where we have a whole bunch of data and then the chef is missing. Because if you remember from the console, you can't create a recipe object without chef, because our recipe model right here, recipe.rb, it validates chef ID. And it ensures that chef ID is present, right? So if you tried to create a recipe without a chef ID, it won't allow you to do that. For now, we're going to just hard code a chef ID to each recipe. And then once we have user authentication created and rolled out, at that point, we'll change that code. So for now, we're just going to hard code a chef. So recipe.chef, chef.find. I think our first chef was Bob, so I'm going to assign it the second chef, which is Mashur, so that we have the gravatar image that we can work with. Okay. So now there's a format to which you want to handle create and update actions, which we'll talk about later. So it's if recipe dot save, do something, else we want to render the template again, the new template. So if we're able to save this recipe object, great. Else we're going to render the template again. Okay. Now, what is this? What do we want to do here? We want to send some sort of notification that the recipe was created, and then, you know, redirect to a certain path. So flash success, because this success will basically give it like some green color around it. Your recipe was created successfully. And then we want to redirect it back to the index page so that the user can see their recipe, right? So redirect to recipes path. How do I know recipes path is the index page? If I go back to terminal and if you look at your routes recipes right here, so recipes underscore path, it goes to recipes controller index action. Okay, so that's the page we want to redirect to once saved. All right, so let's try this out, see what happens. If I want to go to recipes, .new name, this is a new recipe. Summary, this is testing a new recipe. 1, create recipe. 2, test it out. 3, build a form. 4, display a form. Okay, now let's see what happens once you click create recipe. Okay, that seemed to have worked. Now notice we didn't get that message. We were supposed to get, if you look over here, we did this flash success, your recipe was created successfully. We did not get any notification that the recipe was created, right? So now we're going to handle that, and we're gonna create a message partial, and then we'll go and we'll add that and render that from our application main layout file. Okay, so let's take care of that right now. But before we handle that though, let's see real quick if the recipe was created. There you go. That's the recipe we had just created, right? So this is new recipe. If you click on it, there it is. This is testing new recipe, and then the steps, and then the title and the grab. Okay, great. So let's go back to return to recipes listing. Now, one thing I do want to update here is that notice how this is showing up in one line, even though we had entered this in multiple lines. We'll fix that later, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and work on the message. The message is partial. So first thing I want to do, under views, and then our main layout file, which is under layouts at application HTML ERB, is under div class container, and right above the yield, we want to render the messages here, right? Because we want any message to show on top right before the navigation, right under the navigation, and before any content on our page. So let's go ahead and enter that here. And to do that, you just type in render layouts messages. Now, this is relying on there being a messages partial under layouts, which we don't have right now, but that is what we're going to create. So let's go ahead, go to, let me save this first. Under layouts, right click, new file, underscore. Remember, all partials start with an underscore. Messages.html.erb. Okay, now let's add some formatting. Div class row. Then div class, we want it to span 10 columns, so col mid 10. And then since we said flash success, so it's a flash message, so flash dot each do message underscore type for one, and then the actual message. Okay, now the actual message. So let's give it div class alert. Alert. Now here, remember we're passing in success. Now if we pass in danger, because we're going to use this message partial later on also. Anytime we flash anything, we want to use this partial. So we're going to use some embedded Ruby here. And we want it to print out the message type. So in this case, it was flash success from the new form. But if it was, let's say, danger, then this part would say alert danger, which is a Twitter Bootstrap class. And danger colors it red, then success colors it green, basically. So message type. Oops, made an error there. Okay, so div class. Okay, there's the error. All right. And then I want to show the message, but I also want to give it an anchor tag to close the box. So that little on top of pages, like you want the message to show here, but you want that little cross right at the end so that you can close that box. So that's what we're going to build now. So a class close data dismiss alert, and the HTML for that cross is and hash 215 or and pound 215 semicolon. Okay. Let me close a div. Let me just check this real quick, make sure I didn't make any errors. That looks right, so let's try it out. So over here, if I reload the page, there you go. Your recipe was created successfully. Okay, great. All right, so now let's try out a new recipe and see if it's working. Another new test recipe. Summary is recipe 1, create recipe, 2, create form, 3, submit form, 4, test. Okay, create recipe. Okay, see the message, your recipe was created successfully, and then we see there's the new recipe. Okay, perfect. So our new form seems to be working as we expect. Now, there's one last thing I need to do before we're done with the new form, and that is if I go to new again, remember we have validations associated with the new form. So if I don't enter in a name or summary or description, it's not going to work. So if I just hit create recipe, I see that nothing happened. It's because the validations were there, but they're not showing it over here because I don't have any method of showing this, right? I didn't create any view for the validations to show up here or any HTML. So let me go ahead and create that, and I want to eventually move that to a partial, but for now I'm going to add it to the new HTML ERB. Right on top here, if you remember, the validation errors show up in they're basically caught in the object and they're stored in the object itself, and you can refer to them by saying .errors.any, which will tell you if there are any, which is a boolean that tells you if there are any errors associated with the object. And then you can get you can use the full messages method to display what those errors are. So let's go ahead and do that. if, remember we have our recipe object, which is where the errors will be stored if we do have any errors and on submission. So if recipe.errors.any, we want to do something, right? So let's give it some formatting. So div class row and div class alert danger call mid 8 so that it shows up on top, and I want it to be in the middle. So call mid offset 2. That's basically the same area that this is showing up. So I want it to show right on top of it. Okay. Please correct the following errors. Then I want an unordered list because I don't know how many errors there are going to be. Recipe.errors.full_messages. Now, if you remember from an earlier lesson, we had actually tried this out in the Rails console when we were testing validations. So this will have like an array of all the messages. So we want to iterate through them, right? So .each to iterate through to message. Okay, and then I want to list them out. So li and then the actual message, right? So if there are any errors associated with the recipe object, it's going to display those. All right, so this should work. So let's go ahead and try this out. Actually, let me just create a new recipe. All right, so now I'll leave all of it open. Now create recipe. Okay, perfect. So we have the formatting that we wanted. It's showing all the validations. Name can be blank, name is too short, summary can be blank. Now, just to make sure that they're all working, now if I type in something here, these first two should go away. So now if I click create recipe, now notice how the name can be blank and name is too short has disappeared, and now you have the other ones. Okay, so the errors are working and the validations are working and the errors are showing up, and we were able to handle successful submission also. So that's great. Our new action seems to be working correctly, and in the next lesson we'll handle the edit action and the update action that handles the edit form submission. Okay, I'll see you there.